Going live, and we're live. Hello, everybody out there on YouTube land. We're just popping on. It's about 1 minute before 9 p.m. GMT plus one. So we're just on early as usual to make sure everything's working okay. We're getting a couple of wee lines on the YouTube studio thing, so hopefully it'll stay. Fingers crossed. Okay. Yeah. Looking a bit odd tonight, isn't it? I think. So thank you very much for joining me on the Science Fiction Station. And tonight's our Dune book club, and we're on with chapter 25 tonight, I think, which is quite a good chapter. I suppose I'm just in one from walking the dogs, folks. So apologies as usual. Trying to catch my breath and get here on time. So I'm so badly organized. I haven't even got my glasses on yet. But let's work that out. There we go. So I hope you're all keeping well, no matter where you are, folks. Say hello if you're about or so inclined in the live chat. And let's have a wee look. Let's just get our notebooks open. So I hope you have all had a nice holidays, etc., etc. Pardon me. Not such a pleasant thing over here, unfortunately, as usual. Hello, says Joseph Smith. Hello, Joseph. How you doing, sir? Hope you're keeping well. Now, let me see. Chapter 25. There we go. I was talking about whether this book would survive, by the way, me annotating it. I'm starting to put the money as a hard no. I don't think by the time we get to the end of this book, I expect this book to fall apart, actually. So there you go. But I've just started to notice some shifts in the spine just from the wear and tear. Hello. There we go. One dog in the doghouse tonight. Excuse me. Bear with me a wee second. We're doing a bit of decorating and moving bits and pieces in here as well, just to try and get ourselves a wee bit better organized. And as usual, we're still trying to get over this old throat infection. So here we go. Chapter 5. Sorry, I keep doing that. Chapter 25. And let's take a wee look at our epigraph. Muad'Dib could indeed see the future, but you must understand the limits of this power. Think of sight. You have eyes yet cannot see without light. If you're on the floor of a valley, you cannot see beyond your valley. Just so, Muad'Dib could not always choose to look across the mysterious terrain. He tells us that a single obscure decision of prophecy, perhaps the choice of one word over another, could change the entire aspect of the future. He tells us the vision of time is broad, but when you pass through it, time becomes a narrow door. And always he fought the temptation to choose a clear, safe course, warning that path leads ever down into stagnation. From the Arrakis Awakening by the Princess Irulan. Pardon me. Goodness gracious. I always wonder when my throat gets tickly when I start reading these things. I'm absolutely fine beforehand. Given about 10 minutes in, we're always kind of good after a while, I think. So I'll just catch up with everybody saying hello. There's Bob saying, evening, Doc. Joseph Smith saying, I did have an excellent holiday. Thank you. Good stuff, Joseph. Excuse me. Yeah. Let me see. I wonder, is that that might be a better use. I must see if I can figure out to do something about my coughing with the mute button. The mute button on my microphone is so slow to work. You tend to have to put it about 3 times. Sorry, folks. Let's see. There's Thought First saying, hello, first time here. Hello, Thought First. Thanks very much for joining us, and you're more than welcome. Welcome to the Dune Book Club on the Science Fiction Station. I'm Doc Sloan, so you're more than welcome. Thanks for joining. Joseph says, thankfully there are many copies to procure should this one fit. Well, true, yeah. Well, it wasn't that I didn't have a copy. I suppose I still do have a couple of copies of Dune aside from the nice one that I have, but they are in bits, literally. So Cynthia says, hello, Doc, and all. And Babs Barrow, howdy Thought First, thanks for joining us. Howdy, Cynthia, and Rolando Sala saying, howdy, Doc, hope you're doing better. I'm doing not too bad. As I said, we've had quite a nasty wee throat infection. Not the sort for antibiotics, I suppose, But and I suppose my throat's never been not always the best, but starting to feel a lot better, bit more energy, and we're taking our vitamins and our cough sweets. And I suppose as long as I remember to take fluids and occasionally come up for air, we'll be okay. So here we go. Let's have a wee look at this epigraph. Oh, here, just by the way, folks, before we get started, excuse me. Let me put that's on the wrong hand. Before we get started, I wanted to say it's happy birthday to Rome. So today's April the 21st, which is the traditional founding of the city of Rome in the year 753 BC. So today would actually be the year 2775 AUC, or what we call Ab Urbe Condito. Condita, sorry, that's terrible of me. Which is from the founding of the city of Rome. So it's one of those interesting days. Within Rome, it's 21st of April is a festival within ancient Romans to the goddess Pales. So the other thing I wanted to say is in relation to our Greek mythology thing, that we're often looking out for little references, etc., etc. And I was wondering about one of these things. We've been talking about Byzantium recently, and also goodness gracious, what was it? Carthage are the two, I suppose, ancient cities that have popped into our mind recently. But in terms of, I'm kind of kicking myself on this one. We have looked at a lot of the planets and talked about their mythological references, etc. And I didn't find one for Caledon. I'm kicking myself now. It's Caledon. So for anybody who's not familiar with this, there's a very famous story in Greek mythology known as the Caledonian Hunt, and you'll find it in Apollodorus, I believe. Caledon would be a Greek city in Aetolia, and it's a very famous hunt, including it features a number of I suppose the Argonauts. Arguably, probably one of the most notable Argonaut is the is the female Argonaut Atalanta, who's heavily involved in that hunt. So there we go. Just in terms of bringing things back to the Greek myths, etc. And I've started to notice a few more, starting to get my mind thinking about a few more wee things. Might be able to sort of add and embellish what we've got already with the Pelopids, I suppose. But anyway, chapter 25. That was all. I just wanted to remind myself to point that out. Let's take a wee look. So this is Muad'Dib. Muad'Dib can see the future. Yes, indeed. But we're being told about the limits of his power. The example that we're given is if you have sight, for example, eyes, then you cannot see without light. And we get this idea that if you're on the floor of a valley, you cannot see beyond the valley. Once again, I suppose we get told Muad'Dib could not always choose to look across this mysterious terrain. So once again, this is to do with this idea of Alfred Korzybski's within general semantics, the idea that the map is not the territory, if you like. Excuse me. It's probably the thing that general semantics is most famous for. So this is from Paul, I suppose, being told to Ireland, but he tells us that a single obscure decision of his prophecy, one choice, a particular word over another, can change the entire aspect of the future. We're told his vision of time is broad, but when you pass through it, the time becomes a narrow door. And that he's always fighting the temptation to choose a clear, safe course. Warning, that path leads ever down into stagnation. So in terms of what we get here with this epigraph, it's pretty important. Tells us a little bit about Paul's prescience, and I suppose that gives us a little bit of a sense about how other people who have limited prescience in the Dune universe use it as well, such as the Guild. And I just wanted to point out, we're going to have a couple of things brought up here. This will relate directly to Paul's experience later in this chapter. But in particular, what we're talking about here, a single obscure decision of prophecy, choice, one word or another. Ladies, behave. Sorry, that's the doggies going nuts there in the doghouse. one word over another. This change something like this can change the entire aspect of the future. This is chaos, is what we're talking about here. And we'll discuss. I think we're going to get to a point where we mention chaos is mentioned and discussed a couple of times here, but that's what we're talking about. Chaos. And for all of you know, your what is it they call it? The butterfly effect, isn't it? If a butterfly flaps its wings, can cause a hurricane in another part of the world. This kind of idea. But in this sense, this is what Herbert's running with. It's, I suppose, to do with some ideas about chaos theory at the time. Excuse me. And we're going to encounter the nature of the Dune universe and the whole idea of order to chaos perspective. With Paul, I suppose, offering himself as a different kind of order. Now, let me see. In terms of our books in particular, the one that we're talking about that looks at this very heavily, bear with me a wee second. I think I just popped it on the shelf here. There we go. Right. A book that, now, this book is kind of in three parts, if you like. It's called Chaos Theory, Asimov's Foundations and Robots, and Herbert's Dune, The Fractal Aesthetic of Epic Science Fiction. This is by Donald E. Palumbo. We've talked a good bit about this book. This book, the third part of it, focuses on Dune. Pardon me, and looks at particularly the monomyth as a fractal pattern in the Dune series. So it's to do with chaos in the Dune series. And again, this idea that Dune is a response to Asimov's Foundation, which is seen as a chaos to order perspective, if you like. Dune would therefore be seen as order to chaos. So anybody who really would, I don't know how hard this is to get, really, to be honest with you, but I picked it up on a secondhand bookshop, something like ABE years ago, without much problem. It's a really insightful book. I really enjoy it. As I say, I've I've highlighted the heck out of it, as they say. It's got some really interesting things. It plots within plots, patterns within patterns, chaos theory, structures and concepts in the Dune novels. And we've talked about how I sometimes view the Dune series as pairs of books rather than trilogies, if you like. But the self-similarity of the architecture, for example, there we go, within the Dune series. There's it's really good, really interesting read. Highly recommend it if you can get your hands on it. We'll just pop that there for now. So chaos, and chaos, quite interesting. It's going to turn up a fair bit here in this chapter. It's important. I suppose it's important to Paul's messianic nature and the nature of his prophetic vision, if we like. So we left, and of course the other thing is then about this epigraph, one final thing really. We're told he's always fighting the temptation. His vision of time seems to be broad, but when you decide to pass through it, when you reach a moment within it, it becomes a narrow door. So I suppose the further you're away from a moment, the broader your options are within what he can see within time. But the closer you approach to a moment, any given point within that time, then your options become incredibly narrow and focused. He fights the temptation to choose a safe, clear course. And the warning with it is, if you keep picking a clear path that seems safe to you, it'll have bad consequences. It'll lead to stagnation. And with Paul at this point, we have to assume that that's not just on a personal level, but that actually works on a level for all of mankind. Right. So we had a cliffhanger prior to this. We've had a little sort of gap where we've seen Howat and his men trying to interact with a bunch of Fremen, and they've been attacked. Looks like Howat's either dead or captured at the previous chapter. And prior to that, we kind of had this ornithopter swooping in on Paul and Jessica. So we get the resolution of this cliffhanger. And ornithopter's gliding out of the night. Paul grabs his mother's arm. Don't move. And then he sees the lead craft. Within the moonlight, we're told that the way its wings are cupped for landing tells him that this is Duncan Idaho at the controls. All to do with the way the thing is, sort of its reckless dash of the hands at the controls, etc. There's a haphazard way about the way it's flown. Excuse me. And it's Idaho, Paul breathed. So we're told he's quite an actiony sort of chapter, this, I suppose, and it's got a lot of intrigue and a lot of mystery and elements of, I would say, a fair amount of elements of the Arabian Nights and things like that here. The ornithopters land in a basin, and we're told that like a covey of birds in their nest. And Idaho's out and running with two figures in Fremen robes, and Paul recognizes one of them as Liet Kynes, as the sandy bearded Kynes. This way Kynes called, and he veers left. Excuse me. So we're told behind Kynes the other Fremen are covering up the ornithopters with some kind of fabric that makes them seem now to appear like a row of shallow dunes. Duncan Idaho skids to a stop in front of Paul, salutes. My lord, Fremen have temporary hiding place nearby. And of course, Paul asks, what about back there? So Paul points to the violence above the distant cliff, the jet flares, the purple beams of lasguns lacing the desert. And a rare smile touched Idaho's round, placid face. My lord, sire, I've left them a little sip, and he's cut off. So the language here, just as we're about to move forward a wee bit, my lord and sire, in terms of what Duncan's saying to Paul here, he's addressing him by his correct title, if you like. That it's an acknowledgement that the father's dead and that Paul is now the head of House Atreides. Excuse me. And again, sort of what about back there? It suggests, I think that violence that we're looking back on is what erupts around Thufir and the Fremen from the previous chapter. So Duncan's we're told his rare smile, his round, placid face. What he says, I've left them a little and we get this interruption. And there's a glaring white light that fills the desert, bright as a sun, etching their shadows onto the rock floor of the ledge. And with one sweeping motion, Idaho grabs Paul's arm and Jessica's shoulder, hurtles them down off the ledge into the basin, where they sprawl together in the sand. So he's basically, we get the roar of this explosion. Where are we? So the roar, they sprawled together in the sand as the roar of an explosion thundered over them. Its shockwave tumbled chips off the rock ledge that they'd vacated. Idaho sat up, brushed sand from himself, and Jessica's thought, oh no, not the family atomics, I thought. And of course, Paul knows. So he interrupts her as well, these interruptions, but it's not the family atomics at all. Paul's figured it out, does the mental homework for us, if you like. It's not atomics. He planted a shield back there. Idaho was a big one, turned it to full force, and a las beam has touched it. And of course, we know that one of the standoffish natures of the shield technology, the technologies developed from the Holtzman effect, is that when a lasgun's beam interacts with an active shield, we get subatomic fusion. And of course, we have all sorts of sort of reasons politically for not using this kind of thing as a weapon, I suppose. And one of the main ones, I suppose, is that it's hard to distinguish between the subatomic fusion created by a lasgun on a shield and actually a nuclear weapon. And Idaho just sort of shrugs this off. I think it's quite funny. So they're saying sensitivity to initial conditions. Paul can make a beginning by passing through the narrow door. Maybe this is the other aspect of the attitude of the knife, chapter 20, that establishes an ending. Sensitivity to initial conditions. Paul can make a beginning. Maybe. Yeah. Interestingly, we were talking about kind of the chthonic rebirth of Paul and Jessica in the last chapter, and there's another kind of similar thing here. Again, going through a tunnel, emerging out from an underground situation into a flight, if you like. And and I suppose as much as we were talking about chthonic deities and that kind of thing the last time, this is also another kind of rebirth in this chapter, I suppose, and taking flight is more suggestive of Paul being a bit of an Olympian, I think, in the sense of the Greek myths. Other aspect of the attitude of the knife establishes an ending. Yeah, I suppose we get lots of little quick starts and stops here, don't we? Within this section of the book, it's quite breakneck. We're moving here and there, back and forward a little bit in time, and I suppose it's meant to disjoint the reader a little bit in the same way that it must do for Paul and Jessica, and at the same time giving us that sort of sense of prescience that Paul has, because we're often forewarned about things, or we have foreknowledge of them. So, Duncan said basically created a nuclear explosion, and he seems to be happy about it. Not the family atomics. Again, these are sort of hidden somewhere, we've been told. So this is a concern that they possibly have been used. Paul sees through it. It's actually a shield. We have this. So subatomic fusion, Jessica said, that's a dangerous weapon. I just wanted to say that the next thing here, I think, is a very stupid statement. Not a weapon, my lady, defense. That's the stupid statement there. I don't really know what to think of that, except that it's really stupid. That scum will think twice before using las guns another time. So no, it's most definitely a weapon. And there's no difference between a weapon that's used for attack and a weapon that's used for defense, if you like. A weapon's a weapon. And you could point out that anything can be turned into a weapon, pretty much. So as much as I get it's a defensive tactic for going down the road, to say it's not a weapon is really quite stupid. It's an offensive weapon that's going to remain a defensive weapon after its use, if you like, because of the threat of it. Just very odd thing to say, I thought. Didn't make any sense to me. So we have Fremen up above them, and they're basically, one calling down, we should get undercover, friends. And Idaho saying, of course, that the blast will attract considerable attention, sire. And again, Paul's thoughts, we've talked about this just a wee moment ago, drift to this word sire. And we're told that the word has such a strange sound when it's directed at him. Sire has always been directed at his father. Just that, it's one of these things, it's a hereditary title, I suppose. It's been passed to Paul, but it's literally just the previous day that this would be everyone calling his father sire. So we have a bit of one of Paul's visions here. And again, because we've had our little epigraph on prescience, that he indeed can see the future, let's take a wee look at this. This is quite important. He felt himself touched briefly by his powers of prescience, seeing himself infected by the wild race consciousness that was moving the human universe toward chaos. The vision left him shaken, and he allowed Idaho to guide him along the edge of the basin to a rock projection. Fremen there were opening a way down into the sand with their compaction tools. So it doesn't really tell us too much. He feels he's touched briefly by his powers of prescience, and he sees himself infected, like a disease, by wild race consciousness that is moving the human universe towards chaos. So in this sense, I think, again, this is kind of to do with, we have this idea, bear with me a second, this book that influences Frank Herbert's Dune quite a bit is by N.I.M. Walter from 1950, and it's called The Sexual Cycle of Human Warfare. Pardon me. And we just had I think we had a wee bit of a mention about that within the last couple of chapters as well. So, and also this race consciousness, very much, and this wild race consciousness, the need for our genes, if you like, to engage in war in order to renew the human race. This is what this idea is about. and it's left him shaken. He's not happy about it. So much so that that's Duncan guide him. So we get this sort of little interaction between Duncan and Paul, and it's a bit, I don't know, a bit obsequious, I suppose. Can I take your pack, sire? It's not heavy, Duncan, says Paul. You have no shield. Do you wish mine? Keep your shield, Duncan. Your right arm is shield enough for me. So, and again, we get, excuse me, goodness gracious, where's my throat away? Oh, Jessica sees the way that the praise takes effect. How Idaho moves closer to Paul. Such a sure hand my son has with his people. So a little bit of a droit manipulation. It's kind of the right thing to say, isn't it? Right thing to say. Duncan, your right arm is like a shield. It's slightly hyperbolic. It's involves similes, etc. It's theatrical language, if you like. Not from Idaho, but yeah, it's the sort of thing designed again to imprint, if you like, men onto a leader. This kind of thing, this kind of rhetoric is what I would call it. So the Fremen they've been moving down into the basin, along the edge of the basin to a rock projection, and the Fremen are opening a way down into the sand. So the Fremen remove a rock plug that opened a passage down into the native basement complex of the desert. A camouflage cover was rigged for the opening. Oh, excuse me a wee second. I'm just going to close this door over. Oh, dear, oh dear. There we go. A wee bit of outside noise there. Sorry, folks. Yeah. So the word native here, I suppose, is a bit interesting. But I can't, let's see, there's a native basement complex of the desert and a camouflage cover rigged for the opening. So they're going down into the desert, inside the planet, if you like, which I think is quite interesting. They've already kind of had this experience in the still tent. And once again, they're going into the earth itself, sorry, not the earth, but into the world itself, into the world of Arrakis. And so here we go. Let me just get my notes over here, folks. So yeah, it's about secret caves, underground entrances, all of that, mysterious. And they're told this way, and they're led down through a set of rock steps into darkness. So behind them, we're told a bit more sort of description. We get the cover. The cover's blotted out the moonlight, and we get this dim green glow that comes alive ahead, and it reveals steps and rock walls. We keep talking about these, and almost all of these interior scenes are green lit. Pardon me. And we'll have to have a wee, again, we keep saying that we'll have to have a wee look at some of these Freudian color associations, get them actually up on the wall in front of me so we can refer to them. So there are robed Fremen all around them, and they're pressing downward around the corner, and we're told there's another down slanting passage. It opens up into this rough cave chamber, and then we get a bit of description of Leat. Okay, let's have a wee look. Now, Kine stood before them, Jubba hood thrown back, the neck of his still suit glistening in the green light. His long hair and beard were mussed, the blue eyes without whites were a darkness under heavy brows. And in the moment of encounter, Kynes wondered at himself, why am I helping these people? It's the most dangerous thing I've ever done. It could doom me with them. Good question. Now, we've got a little bit of let me just want to have a wee nosy here at our Jubba cloak. There we go, his Jubba hood. The Jubba cloak is the all-purpose cloak. It can be set to reflect or emit radiant heat, converts to a hammock or shelter, commonly worn over a still suit on Arrakis. So there you go. Just in case we want to know what a Jubba hood is. Now, so again, his thoughts, why am I helping these people? I could easily be doomed with them. And he looks at Paul, and he sees a boy who's taken on the mantle of manhood. masking his grief, suppressing all except the position that now must be assumed, his dukedom. And Kane's realization here, I suppose, is in that moment that the dukedom still exists. That as long as Paul's alive, the dukedom of Arrakis, in terms of being a fiefdom held by the Atreides, is still a thing in actuality. Solely because of Paul, because he's still alive, and that this in itself is not a thing to be taken lightly. So we get a little bit of a scan around this place, and Jessica has a look around for us, registering the chamber on her senses in a Bene Gesserit way. This is a laboratory, a civil place full of angles and squares in the ancient manner. And Paul's got it immediately. Again, this is one of the Imperial Ecological Testing Stations, or the Imperial Botanical Testing Stations, as they're also known in the Dune universe. And more importantly, he says, I suppose, this is one of those stations that my father wanted. And these are quite important, and they're a little bit of a mystery in some ways. In Dune, is that the botanical. We have a period of history on Arrakis known as the botanical state. Is it the Imperial Botanical Testing Station period or something like that? Well, there's something going on Dune, and then I suppose it's prior to the discovery of Melange, I think, and then something happens, and then they shut all these bases down, and I think we get a sense that there's maybe a few hundred of them on Arrakis. So this is one of the Imperial Ecological Testing Stations my father wanted. And his father wanted Kane's thought. He's not happy about this. And I suppose this wonders, he wonders at himself, am I foolish to aid these fugitives? Pardon me. Why am I doing it? It'd be so easy to take them now, to buy the Harkonnen trust with them. So, I suppose in that sense, he's thinking what a kind of Thufir was afraid of in the previous chapter, of being captured by the Fremen for the, I suppose, either for reward or for political gain, if you like. If we took these two and handed them over to the Harkonnens, this could be enough to buy their trust for a while. Though I don't think that, I suppose that the Fremen would really buy into that idea of the Harkonnens being trustworthy. We get another kind of look around the room, this time from Paul's point of view. We're told he follows his mother's example, gestalting the room, seeing the workbench down one side, the walls of featureless rock, instruments lined the bench, dials glowing, wire grid X-planes with fluting glass emerging from them. An ozone smell permeated the place. Pardon me. I've got some cough medicine up here. Throat's very sort of tickly, flaky. As I said, it feels like a wee pit collapses in your throat or something each time. It just goes on me. So excuse me a wee second, folks. Oh, I can happily trade it in, to get a new one. Robotic voice box or something. But so again, the botanical ecological, I suppose the Imperial Ecological Testing Stations are really important to the Kynes family's dreams of changing the face of Arrakis, and they're fully being used by the Fremen at this point. Right, now let's see. So I'm over the page here. Bear with me a wee second, folks. So he continues. Let's have a wee look. Again, scanning. Some of the Fremen are moving around. We're talking around a concealing angle in the chamber. There are new sounds, machine coughs, whinnies of spinning belts and multi-drives. On the end of the room, we're told that there are cages with small animals in them stacked against the wall. Now, Kynes says, you've recognized this place correctly. For what would you use such a place? Paul Atreides. And again, not calling him Duke or Sire there. And Paul says to make this planet fit for a fit place for humans. And then we get Cain saying in his thoughts, perhaps this is why I'm helping them. It's the kind of we had this sort of interaction between Kynes and Jessica before. It's kind of the lining up of the Atreides' desire for power and possession of the planet with the Fremen dream, the ecological dream of changing the planet into a place that's hospitable to live in. I think from the Atreides' point of view, that idea really comes from we want to tame the place to make it easier to work rather than from any other kind of desire to create a paradise or something like that, you know? So, yes, indeed, we have a problem. Oh, sorry, yes, and the animals, by the way, we're told... Hang on, there we go. The machine sounds abruptly hummed away to silence. Into this void there came a thin animal squeak from the cages. It's cut off abruptly as though in embarrassment. Paul returns his attention to the cages and saw that the animals were brown-winged bats, and there's an automatic feeder extended from the sidewall across the cages. Again, here's these little bats. We're not being told too much about them, but they were being used as in connection with Distrans as a messenger service, basically, by the Fremen in the previous chapter. And we get a sense there's a whole bank of these cages of bats here. So it must be a fairly common way for them to use as a means of communication. And it's not something that, I suppose, if you think about it, that it's a form of communication that can't really be easily intercepted, can it? So where do we go? Right. So there's a problem. And this problem is going to be, well, it's crucial to this chapter, I suppose. It's not a small problem, it's actually a big one. A Fremen emerges from the hidden area of the chamber, speaks to Kynes and says, Leat, calls him Leat, by the way. The field generator the field generator equipment is not working. I'm unable to mask us from proximity detectors. So Kynes asks this Fremen, can he repair it? And he goes, no, parts. Kynes goes, yeah, okay, do without machinery, put up a hand pump for air up to the surface. And the Fremen says, I'll do that immediately, and hurries off. So this little scene is, I suppose, this little interaction is not only a bit of a setup, it's a bit of a Chekhov's gun, I suppose, for how would these people be found in this desert. So it's giving us the reason why they're going to get found, if you like. Don't do without machinery, I suppose, is an interesting little comment. But yeah, I suppose the thing is, you get the sense that the Fremen probably have been here before, possibly. But the idea that all machines fail is what I've made a wee note of here. So this Fremen hurries away, and Kynes turns back to Paul and says that your answer was a good one, basically, to make a planet fit place for humans. He likes this. It lines up with his ecological dream for Arrakis. We switch to Jessica's point of view at this point, and it's really, in terms of how where she's having a look at Kynes in terms of the details of the man, but the interactions with the Fremen give her more insight. And in terms of how he's dealt with this individual, the Fremen who's come to him with a problem, she's marked the easy rumble of Kynes' voice, that it's a royal voice for some reason, accustomed to command. She's not missed the reference to him as Leat. And if we're figuring, have they not figured this one out yet already? And very interestingly, she describes the name Leat, the identity of Leat, as the Fremen alter ego. So Leat is the other face of the Fremen, if you like. It's quite interesting. The other face of this tame, and that's another interesting word, I think, tame planetologist. And I don't know why the word tame is there. And I think it's quite possible that if Dr. Kynes was left to his own devices, he'd just quite happily get on with his ecological work with the Fremen and be a very, very happy individual in his laboratory working on his field work. But he also strikes me as being quite a lethal individual. quite hardened, and he's a Fremen, isn't he? So it's the odd word tame there next to the word planetologist, but I suppose that's what the planetologist wants to do, is tame the planet, if you like. So we're most grateful for your help, Dr. Kynes, Jessica lets him know. And here's we have this interesting little bit. We'll see, Kynes said. Now, he nodded to one of his men. Spice coffee in my quarters, Shamir. At once, Leah, the man said. He indicated an arch opening in the side wall of the chamber, if you please. So we'd had a wee bit of a joke and a chat about science fiction books and their improbable uses of coffee. And Dune is one of those books. So as much as all the dangers going on around here, coffee. In terms of the gentleman that Leah asks to make the coffee, his name is Shamir. And I've had a wee look at this just in terms of names are generally have meaning or importance within Dune. Let me see now. And I believe that Shamir is a Hebrew word, and it's also a Hebrew name. And I've got a couple of conflicting sources on this, but the name I think means flint, though I've got one that says thorn. But there's also an association with this word Shamir, if you want to look it up, to do with this worm or a substance of power, a kind of green stone. Let me just find exactly what I'm talking about. How do we look at it earlier? Solomon's Shamir is what we're talking about. I'll just quickly read you this off of this is on Wikipedia. It says in the Gemara, the Shamir is a worm or a substance that had the power to cut through or disintegrate stone, iron, and diamond. King Solomon is said to have used it in the building of the first temple in Jerusalem in the place of cutting tools. For the building of the temple, which promoted peace, it was inappropriate to use tools that could also cause war and bloodshed. It just says here, referenced throughout the Talmud and the Midrashim, the Shamir was reputed to have existed in the time of Moses as one of the 10 wonders created on the eve of the first Sabbath, just before Yahweh finished creation. Moses reputedly used the Shamir to engrave the Hoshin, stones that were inserted into the breastplate. It says King Solomon, aware of the existence of the Shamir but unaware of its location, commissioned a search that turned up a grain of Shamir the size of a barley corn. So there's some more stuff on this, and in terms of I find this quite interesting. I don't know too much about I suppose some mythologies, etc. It also discusses how the Shamir is mentioned in the Quran. The Quran mentions the Shamir with pointing out the ignorance of the jinn who worked for Solomon concerning the occult, and emphasizing that all knowledge rests only with God. There we go. Let's see. And then we decreed death for him. Nothing showed his death to them save a creeping creature of the earth which gnawed away his staff. And when he fell, the jinn saw clearly how, if they had known the unseen, they would not have continued in despised toil. This wee bit's interesting here. It just says on Wikipedia, according to commentators such as Ibn Abbas, when Solomon died, his body remained leaning on his staff for a long time, nearly a year, until a creature of the earth, which was a kind of worm, gnawed through the stick, weakening it, and the body fell to the ground. It was then that the jinn knew that he had died a long time before, and until then they were working hard, thinking they were being supervised by him. So there you go. There's some interesting stuff there on that name, and I suppose some religious and mythical referencing there. I thought I actually, in that sense, the story of Solomon being dead and the jinn not knowing until the worm whittled away the stick. It reminded me on the death of Cuchulainn, isn't it, that the enemy doesn't know, because Cuchulainn ties himself to a stone and to fight, if you see what I mean. And even when he's dead, he's still attached to the stone, so the enemy don't know he's dead until the Morrigan sends the crows on to the sit on him, and actually that's the point where they realize he's dead. I just thought there's some similarities in that. And that's all of that from looking up a name of a guy who's bringing in coffee. There you go. I'll just catch up with your comments here a wee second, folks. Let's see. Oh, Chris, in use of the word tame, I took the use of the term tame to mean their own, as in he is their friend and therefore likely to favour them in his dealings with them, rather than the imperial authorities. It's an understanding. Colleges and cannibals. Evening, Doc. You've mentioned chthonic gods in relation to Paul. We can more particularly refer to the myth of the young god. Not all Catholics following the resurrection scheme. Yeah, it's it's I just thought it was interesting because we kind of Catholics to do with Into the Earth, and I suppose in relation to Catholic deities, etc., with worms, we can more particularly refer to the myth of the young god. Not all Catholics follow the same resurrection scheme. Not at all. No. Well, the point was in this one, I thought that he's more Olympian. I think it's the he's up and flying, isn't he? And I suppose there's a bit of confusion with some of the gods in some pantheons, if you like. The Greek pantheon has a couple of chthonic deities in it that kind of shouldn't be there. And that there are an awful lot of, you're quite right, an awful lot of them have quite similar things going on. And I said it's maybe just, I just thought I'd mention it because we had that canal, if you see what I mean, the tunnel in the previous chapter, and linking that into the idea in the dragon and the sea. So it's just a wee bit of I think another similar motif, just really in this chapter. More particularly referred to the myth of the young god. Not all Catholics following the same resurrection scheme. Yeah, at the same time, I could go. I've been having a wee think about Paul actually today, in terms of myths. Colleges. We're just talking about the Caledonian Hunt. Briefly at the start of the program as well, and it's just sort of occurring to me that as much as I thought there is a sort of central reservoir of Greek myths here, there's an abundance of other ones I think around it as well. Yeah, I love saying the word chthonic though. Colleges, it's a great word, isn't it? It's just yeah, it has a great feeling to it. It's one of those words I like throwing into conversation now and then, or as often as possible. So where are we? Let's have a wee look. But yeah, that was our friend Shamir. I thought that was quite interesting. But the whole spice coffee, if you please, into the quarters. So here we go. From Jessica's point of view, again, she allows herself a royal nod before accepting. Saw Paul give a hand signal to Idaho and basically tell him, mount a guard here. So down the passage we go. And again, a bit more seeing from Herbert. It's 2 paces deep, we're told, and opens through a heavy door. It's a square office and lighted by golden glow globes. Jessica checks out the door as she passes, and we're told it's plasteel. And if we look up plasteel in the terminology of the Imperium, we're told that this is steel that's been stabilized with stravidium fibers. Let me just get there. Plastic steel which has been stabilized with stravidium fibers grown into a crystal structure. Now, I've got to look this up, folks. I have to say, I think this is another reference to a science fiction writer. I can't figure out who, but I'm starting to make a note of them as I go. So this is I think the second or third one. And we've only identified one, but I think this is, I can see their name Travis in there or something like that. I don't know. And I know I have a reference in a book somewhere to the science fiction authors that are listed, I think, in this book, or that are paid homage to. So if I don't know if anybody else has figured it out, but there are a bunch of them, as far as I know. I'm going to see if I can research this. I think it might be in Timothy O'Reilly's book. There's one of the books where possibly a Brian Herbert book on his father. It references little nods to various science fiction writers, I think. What was the one we had already? I can't remember. It's quite an obvious one, I thought. Well, we'll see if we can get to it anyway. But yeah, just in case, I don't know, maybe see if I can find an anagram generator or something like that. But it kind of struck me, and it doesn't have any other reference within the terminology of the Imperium. So it's just one of those ones, and I went, I think that's possibly a nod to a science fiction writer. Right, so Jessica checks out the door. It's plasteel, made from these strontium fibers. This technology is going to give a sort of delay, I suppose, to allow Paul and Jessica to escape. So Paul's point of view, they're 3 paces into the room, drops his pack, and the door closes behind him. He studies the place, told it 8 meters to his side, walls of natural rock that are curry-coloured again. Sort of wasn't very happy with Herbert using that because curry can be lots of different colours, I think. I quite like a nice madras myself, so it'll be usually bright red. Broken by metal filing cabinet. It's broken up by metal filing cabinets on the right. There's a low desk with a milk glass top shot full of yellow bubbles. Sounds quite groovy. This occupies the center of the room, and there are 4 suspensor chairs ringing the desk. So Paul's point of view gives us all our little bit of mise en scene here. And Kynes moves around Paul, holds a chair out for Jessica. She sits down, and Jessica, again, switching over to the point of view, notes the way her son is examining the room. We're told, I think this is quite interesting. Paul remains standing for another eye blink. There's something not quite right. There's an anomaly in the room. We're told it's got something to do with the air currents. And he determines once again that there's a secret exit, a secret passage, and it's right behind the cabinets. So we have this down, underground, digging underground into tunnels, caverns, these big steel doors and passages, and then, of course, secret entrances and exits. I thought it's all very Arabian Nights, I thought. Yeah. Very much so. So, would you like to sit down? Paul Atreides again. And I suppose Paul's going to notice it, but we had this before, not using the title. And Paul's thoughts, how carefully he avoids the title. Paul accepts the chair, remains silent. Kynes sits down. So Kynes says, you sense Arrakis could be a paradise. Yet the Imperium only sends trained hatchet men, seekers after spice. So we've had a little bit of a confrontation, I suppose, a little bit of a cultural misunderstanding previously between Fremen and Thufir Hawat. Here we've got Paul and Liet Kynes. Arguably, they're 2 leaders now. And I think there's a different kind of understanding here because Liet Kynes is a man who, as we're told, serves 2 masters. He's a member of the Imperium, planetary ecologist. I'd assume it's somebody of quite high rank. And he's also pretty much the de facto Fremen leader. So Paul holds up the ducal signet ring. He says, see this ring? Yes, says Kynes. You know its significance. And Jessica turns sharp. Again, we get this. You get a lot of Jessica reacting, I suppose, to her son here. Stares at her son. And Kynes rather matter-of-factly tells him, well, it pretty much means your father's dead. And the ruins of Arrakis, and pretty much you're technically the Duke. Sorry, I've gone over a page here. Let me just see how he puts it. Your father lies dead in the ruins of Arrakis, Kynes said. You're technically the Duke. So Paul's response here, I suppose, gives us a bit of a sense of the Empire. In some ways, as much as their authority from the Imperium as houses of Landsrat, he says, "I am a soldier of the Imperium." Technically, as you put it, a hatchet man. Kynes' face darkened. So even with the Emperor's Sardaukar standing over your father's body, even after all this, so Paul basically says, I'm a man of the Empire. I'm a soldier of the Imperium, one of your hatchet men, as you call us. And Kynes is a bit, here. And it is a dangerous thing, I think. And even with the Emperor's own Sardaukar, the Empire has done this. It's killed your father. Even with them standing over the body of your father, you're calling yourself a man of the Empire. And I think that's where the real problem is there. And as a, it's well, maybe I haven't chosen correctly. Maybe I shouldn't help these people. I think that sense is there for a moment. Now, Paul says the Sardaukar, that's one thing. The legal source of my authority, here we go, that's another. Now, this, I suppose, again, it's about the source of Paul's authority. And I suppose we have this thing about moral law and ethical law, etc. But Kynes kind of brings the planet into it here. This is Arrakis. Arrakis has its own way of determining who wears the mantle of authority. The planet has its own way of choosing. And again, we've talked a wee bit about the planet Arrakis, in a sense, really being a character in this book. Not quite anthropomorphized, certainly, but it does have an absolute presence. And in this chapter, I suppose we're going to see it try to kill again, some of our major characters, if we want to look at it that way. That the storm is part of the planet. So this, I suppose, we're heading towards this. Paul's coming up with a plan in his head, and it's going to be a plan with, I suppose, different aspects to it. And one of those aspects is going to be the legal side of it. He has a legal source of authority. That's a whole different thing from who killed my father. Where does my authority come from? I'm a duke, and I'm the Duke of Arrakis, is pretty much what he's saying here. Kynes' response here as well, I don't know what you guys think here. The planet has its own way of determining who wears the mantle of authority here. That's kind of eye roll here. And it's, in that sense, it is a sort of statement of power from Kynes, I think. Cynthia says, the interesting order by Kynes to get a hand pump for air out to the surface. So for this long upcoming conversation, are Fremen working by hand to provide air for talking, breathing? I don't know. I'd imagine there'd be some air down there. It depends on how long the place has been cooled, how many Fremen are down there, etc. But I get it. A sense of scale. Like you have the little sand snorkels for the still tents. I think it's something similar for a much larger group of people. But you need fresh air coming in and something to blow the carbon dioxide out, I suppose, wouldn't you? Or Fremen working by hand to provide air for talking and breathing. It's quite possible. Kind of making me think of Canticle for Leibowitz and the monks on the bicycle generating electricity. There's a book I haven't read in a long time. Pardon me. Right, folks, I'm going to take another wee sip. My throat's, and I thought my throat was doing okay actually today. Well, it's not so much tonight. Feeling a bit subdued. Now, Jessica's point of view turns back to look at Kynes. Again, getting the sense of this man. There's steel in this man. No one has taken the temper out of it. And we've need of steel. Paul's doing a dangerous thing. Poking at Kynes' authority, I suppose, or trying to play top trumps in terms of authority. Paul says there's the Sardaukar on Arrakis are a measure of how much the Emperor really feared my father. Or the beloved Emperor, I think, isn't that the word he uses? The Sardaukar on Arrakis are a measure of how much our beloved Emperor feared my father. Now, I will give the Padishah Emperor reasons to fear the... And it's almost like a megalomaniac speech. No, I shall do... And he's cut off, if you see what I mean. Lad, ooh, Kynes said. There are things you don't. So it sounds like he's kind of going off on a bit of a rant, and Kynes is trying to be a bit reasoned here. Lad, whoa, this kind of thing. There are things you don't, and he takes it quite frostily. You will address me as sire or my lord, Paul said. Gently, Jessica thought. Now, Kynes stared at Paul, and Jessica noted the glint of admiration in the planetologist's face, the touch of humour there. So he has this kid going, "You will refer to me as sire or my lord," which is a bit much, I have to say. I certainly know what kind of response that would get from me. it would be very funny, but it would be no. Followed by a lesson on the word no and its meaning. But but in this case, there's something amused about Kynes here, something sympathetic. He has sympathy for Paul, definitely here. And he is looking at a young man in a point of crisis who's saying, "Refer to me as sire or my lord instead of lad," and he acquiesces. Okay, sire, yeah, and it shows that he's quite mature. I think, although we would hope he would be. He's a doctor and has a planetologist, so he's a bit of a grown up here in the room, I think. Not saying that Paul isn't, if you see what I mean. But there's an edge to Paul here, and it almost looked like he was about to go, "I'm off on a mad rant here." So Kynes stared hard at Paul, thinks about it, notes the glint of admiration in Kynes' face, touch of humour. This is Jessica's observation, and he goes, "Sire." So he goes with it. So Paul goes on then, doesn't really dwell on the matter. "I'm an embarrassment to the Emperor. I'm an embarrassment to all who would divide Arrakis as their spoil." So pretty much anyone who's got anything to do with the planet and melange, etc., I'm an embarrassment. As long as I live, I'll continue to be an embarrassment. I'll stick in their throats and I will choke them to death. And Kynes just says words, but like what Paul was going to say previously when Kynes cut him off, with just words. Paul stares at him, he's sizing him up, and then presently speaks. Here we go. So this is Operation Atreides, if you like. This is the Missionaria Protectiva. This is using Leto's advice to Paul that if things go wrong, the Lisan al Gaib, use that to your own advantage. And it's probably, it works on a number of levels here, but here we go. You have a legend. Let me just read this from the book, actually. I think it's quite important. You have a legend of the Lisan al Gaib here, the voice from the outer world, the one who will lead the Fremen to paradise. Your men have, and Kynes' response, superstition! The big exclamation mark. We've had Kynes' responses to superstition and stuff like, or what do you call, but could it be true? This kind of thing. He's I'd say he's. We're told that the ruling classes of the Landsraad, for example, are agnostic in their outlook, and I would suggest that that's probably the case with Kynes. I think he's a Fremen. I think he probably, as much as I'm a scientist and I don't believe in superstitious nonsense, I think he has an element. There is an element to him that is superstitious, is religious, and it's probably, if he has any clue about what happened to his father, I dare say be aware of it. And I think he does. We know that later on. We know that Pardo and Liet have had conversations about the dangers that can befall your people. That a hero can happen to them. This kind of thing. So the legend, here we go. You have a legend that Lisan al Gaib, the voice from the outer world, someone who'll lead the Fremen to paradise. Your men have superstition. Perhaps, says Paul. Yet, and there's that word, perhaps not. Superstitions have strange roots, strange branchings. They do indeed. Kynes says, well, you have a plan. That much is obvious, sire. And the word comes in a fair bit. So here we go. This is Paul's plan, as we get from this point in the book. And it's simply this. Okay, first of all, there's elements to it, and we can start to see what they are. First things first, can your Fremen get me proof? of Sardaukar dressed in Harkonnen uniforms. Kynes' answer here is, yeah, most likely. The Emperor will put a Harkonnen back in power here, says Paul. Perhaps even the Beast Raban. Let him. And again, I'm not really sure what they could do to stop that, but okay. And here we go. Once the Emperor is involved, in all this regard, accepting. Let me just get this from the book here. Sorry, my notes or my handwriting's appalling as usual. Once he has involved himself, that's the word I'm looking for, beyond escaping his guilt. Okay. Let the Emperor face the possibility of a bill of particulars. Oh no. Laid before the Landsrat. Let him answer there where. And again, Jessica's like, Paul, interrupting again. What are you thinking? So this is a legal approach. How is Paul going to get his revenge upon the Emperor? Swords at dawn, knives, etc. This kind of thing, a personal duel for honor. No, he's going to bring a bill of particulars in front of the Landsrat. So it's a political response. It's a legal response. Sorry. Now, Kynes says basically, granted that if the Landsrat High Council hears your case, there's only one outcome. So if you have enough, in other words, if Paul presents his evidence of what's happened on Arrakis, the Sardaukar, the Emperor's involvement, and all Sardaukar and Harkonnen uniform, all of this stuff, the murder of his father as well, the nature of that death, there will be only one outcome. And we're told it's war. And we're told it's general warfare between the Imperium and the great houses. And here's this word we get again, as we're talking about at the start of the chapter, chaos, Jessica said. And Paul tells us, but I'd present my case to the Emperor, Paul said, and give him an alternative to chaos. And I've put, well, the alternative to chaos is order, I suppose, which is what we already have. And I thought surely that was stagnation. So chaos indeed. Present my cause to the Emperor, give him an alternative to chaos. And again, Jessica, in a dry tone, says, blackmail. So yes, it is blackmail. And once again, this is the nature of the Atreides, isn't it? We're going to use the letter of the word of the law to blackmail the Emperor into getting what we want. And he says, yes, blackmail is a tool of statecraft. You said it yourself to Jessica. And Jessica hears the bitterness in his voice. The Emperor has no sons, only daughters. And here we go. So Jessica says it. That's what everybody else is at, by the way. You aim for the throne. Indeed he does. Right. Excuse me, folks. I really need to blow my nose. I'm going to take a wee quick short break. I'll just be 1 second or two. Let me see if I hit that. Ping, that's better. I just noticed the wee mute button down on the YouTube studio rather than the big clunky thing up here. I maybe be able to try and mute a few of my wretched coughs out, folks. That's a lot better. I can breathe a lot better now. Right. So yes, you aim for the throne. We know that the Harkonnens are going for the throne. We know that the Bene Gesserit are going for the throne. Leto, I think, and it was wanting to go for the throne. And Paul's plan here is to go for it, as we know. So the Emperor, Paul tells us, and this bit's interesting, folks, I suppose. I'm curious to see what you think, actually. Where Paul tells us that the Emperor won't risk total war. And I've written next to it, won't he? He won't risk the Imperium shattered, planets blasted, disorder everywhere. He'll not risk that. And I've written next to that, won't he? So at the same time, as much as what we've talked about a second ago, let's put a bill of particulars in front of the Landsraad. That's the legal response. Here's the political machinations behind it, if you like. In terms of politics, I suppose being the science of the happiness of mankind, if you like, or of humanity. It's a desperate gamble you propose, Kynes tells him. It seems pretty desperate. But Paul asks him a question. What do the great houses of the Landsraad fear the most? And the answer is, well, what's happening here and now on Arrakis, isn't it? It's what's been done to my father. That the Sardaukar will pick them off one by one. In fact, we're told by Paul this is why there is a Landsraad in the first place, and that he calls it the glue of the Great Convention. Only in union do they match the imperial forces. So we're told basically that only by that the Landsraad exists as a political balance to the emperor, as a militarial balance to the emperor. That only with all of their forces united, pretty much, can they match what the emperor can produce with his Sardaukar. So what they fear, is being picked off one by one. The Landsraad as a group, too much trouble for the emperor. But if one by one at a time, and here's Leto, bye bye, and the emperor is going to profit massively from this, become more powerful from it. Yeah, it's also the Baron's big concern, isn't it? Whenever, what he's doing to Leto, that if they, people see this is what we can do to royalty, then, we're all game, basically. So the rules are changing here, I think. Only in union do they match the imperial forces. There's the other kind of thing, I suppose, within the Trojan War element of all the different kings swearing to protect Helen of Troy. Whoever marries Helen, that if anything happens, all of the kings of Greece will unite to defend that partnership, if you like, that wedding. Because Helen of Sparta, she's known that has a habit. Well, she's kidnapped more than once, I believe. She's kidnapped as a child by Theseus, for example. So hence whenever Helen either runs off or is carried away by Paris, that's why all the kings of Greece get together under Agamemnon to head off and fight against the Trojans. So this is what they fear. Arrakis will become a rallying cry to them. Each of them will see themselves in my father. What's happened to Leto is what can happen to you. And because it's happened to Leto, it's quite possible that it would, I suppose. And here we go, this is an interesting response. He's been cut out of the herd and killed. Just sort of almost in a sense referring to them as it's like a cattle, isn't it? Kynes goes to Jessica, basically, would the plan work? She goes, well, I'm no mentat. And here's a very interesting response. But you are a Bene Gesserit. Would the plan work? We've just discussed that there's a political nature to this, that rather than that the emperor will never risk all-out war, he'll acquiesce to whatever it is that Paul wishes. If he's put into a corner, it's too big of a risk, too much destruction. Imperium shattered, planets just blasted, disorder everywhere, death, doom, and destruction. He wouldn't risk that. And ultimately, I think, by the way, we'll find that Paul's correct. He won't. But anyway, what Kynes says to Jessica here. Oh, and again, I'm over the page. Hang on. The way we work here. Kynes spoke to Jessica. Would his plan work? I'm no mentat, Jessica said, but you are a Bene Gesserit. She shot a probing stare at him and said, his plan has good points and bad points, as any plan would at this stage. A plan depends as much upon execution as it does upon concept. It was just the probing stare at him. Would the plan work? I'm not a mentat, but you're Bene Gesserit. In other words, it sounds like Kynes has insight into what the Bene Gesserit are. In other words, you understand politics. And if you understand politics, would it work? So we're told it depends upon the execution as well as the concept. The plan has good points and bad points, but it's just being formulated. Now, here we go. What have I got here? Order 34. So Paul quotes this. Wait do you hear this? Law is the ultimate science. Paul quoted, thus it reads above the emperor's door, I propose to show him the law. I've just written utter nonsense. Law is not the ultimate science at all. And there's something written above the emperor's door. This kind of this. Yeah, it's like I don't know how I would put it. Ultimate science meaning knowledge. No, it's it's an imperialist doctrine, isn't it? It's dictatorship in one sentence. Law is ultimate science, and I write the law. So law is everything, is the ultimate that you should know, and I am the law. Basically, it's almost a statement you might get out of a very early Judge Dredd, I suppose, before Judge Dredd starts becoming less a bit of a fascist, if you like, So that's what's written above the emperor's door. Law is the ultimate science. I'll show him the law, and it's making the emperor's own things, I suppose, work against him. Kynes says this, another insightful thing here. I'm not sure I would trust the person who came up with this plan. I think Arrakis has its own plan that and again, he's cut off here. So plans for Arrakis. Arrakis has its own plans. Again, this is the planet making decisions, making choices. I don't think so, but it's the way that Liet phrases it. It's a form of propaganda in itself, isn't it? But Paul makes a statement here that's nearly very problematic. From the throne, I could make a paradise of Arrakis with the wave of my hand. And loyalty is not for sale, sire. So, nope. And it is why I can promise you that, the earth, the moon, the stars, I can do anything, make your dreams come true. But no, you can't buy our loyalty with that. Not for sale, sir. And Kynes is insulted here, stiffened. And it causes Paul, again, how Paul's dealing with him. And we can think back, by the way, to how Paul. Sorry, do you remember how Leto deals with people and Jessica sort of, oh no, he's done that a bit wrong, this kind of thing. We get the same sort of interaction here. Jessica observing how Paul interacts, and he has kind of, oops, but Paul's not his father here. We're told he studies Kynes, stares across the desk at him and gives it the cold glare of blue within blue eyes of the man, studies his bearded face, the commanding appearance. And a harsh smile forms on Paul's lips. And I've just written next to this, this is our sense of the sardonic, I think. Well spoken. I apologize. So simply put, Kynes has stood up to him. And, you offer me everything? No. Well, a 15-year-old boy is going to offer me the world and everything I desire. Not, it's most likely not going to happen. Our loyalty is not for sale, sir. Excuse me. The way Kynes put it, I think, was very polite. But his body language indicates to Paul that I think Paul's insulted him. Well spoken. I apologize. I'm sorry. And this in itself is, I suppose, okay. No Harkonnen has ever admitted error. Kynes tells us, perhaps you're not like them. Atreides. And it's interesting because we all know that Paul's a Harkonnen as well, don't we? So, no Harkonnen ever admitted error. Perhaps you're not like them, Atreides. And I like this. This wee next bit from Paul's funny, I think. Could be a fault in their education. There you go. Why do they not say sorry? They're not taught to. Poor education system. I just thought it's a nice it's a mild joke, isn't it? I think it's just a little clever observation. It's condescending in a way without showing hatred or anything like that. Must be a fault in their education system. Paul says, though, you say you're not for sale. Well, I believe that you will accept the coin that I have. I suppose. Isn't that what he says? Let's see. I know the currency that works with you. In other words, now this is if you like, this is mirroring the problem that Thufir and the Fremen have in the previous chapter, where oh, can we buy your help? What with? Oh, I can promise you money. No, it's water in that sense. Here we have loyalty. Let me just read this wee bit. You say you're not for sale, but I believe I have the coin you'll accept. For your loyalty, I offer my loyalty to you totally. And we get again Jessica's observations on this. My son has the Atreides sincerity. He has that tremendous, almost naive honor. And what a powerful force that truly is. Excuse me. Yeah, it's how would we put it? I've got the Atreides sincerity. I've just written laughing out loud next to it here. They might be sincere. I suppose that might be one quality of them, but it's a bit like I will be your friend and will join you in death as I take you to your death. It's that kind of thing. Excuse me, my nose is driving me mad with itch here. Or tickling me. There we go. So this is one of these kind of manipulations, I think, and we have to wonder, can Paul see all the possible futures that lead to the response here and is just enacting them? We wonder how much of it is just him reacting naturally, I suppose. For your loyalty, I offer my loyalty totally. And her son has the Atreides sincerity. Tremendous, almost naive honor. What a powerful force that truly is. And she saw that Paul's words have shaken Kynes. Kynes says, nonsense, you're just a boy, basically. And Paul again replies, no. I'm the Duke, Paul said. I'm an Atreides. No Atreides has ever broken such a bond. And I've written bollocks next to that one historically. Just no. It has also actually made me ask a question. Which is simply this: is the Atreides family, in terms of history and myth, known in the Dune universe? And surely they must be. That if Paul Atreides, if I'm called Paul Atreides and I'm told about my ancient and family line, don't I know about the House of Atreus and all of those horrible stories? Are they connected? But to go, no, I'm an Atreides is a bit like going, I am from the Hitler family. Don't you know? We have such a good reputation. It's something a wee bit bizarre. Well, Paul's words have shaken Kynes. I'm nonsense, just a boy. I'm the Duke. I'm an Atreides. No Atreides has ever broken such a bond. Yeah. They're really quite bad at the whole. Yeah, don't trust an Atreides. Paul goes on with this, I suppose. Kind swallowed. When I say totally, I mean without reservation. I would give my life for you. And I've written down that these statements are stupid, hyperbolic, have a sense as if the Atreides' bravura, their boldness. But they're sort of larger than life statements. If anybody ever offers to die for you, I would be extremely worried about that person's mental health, and would take a firm no. I don't want that, if you see what I mean. It's an odd thing. It's very religious, I think, sometimes as well. And often within books, I think within novels, it shows I've often said this, it shows a lack of, I think, understanding how precious someone's life is to them. So words, I think, maybe is all I'd ever think if I heard stuff like that. And bad ones, I think. But it works. I mean, we're told, sire, and the word is torn from him. And Jessica saw that Kynes was not talking to a 15-year-old boy anymore, but to a man, and the very disturbing sentence here, to a superior. Um, hmm. Let me just get it in the text here, folks. Sire, here we go. Sire, Kynes said, and the word was torn from him. But Jessica saw that he was not now speaking to a boy of 15, but to a man, to a superior. Now Kynes meant the word. There's something quite dodgy about that whole thing. Now he means it. In this moment, she thinks, he'd give his life for Paul. How do the Atreides accomplish this so quickly, so easily? So it must be something to do with their genes. Who knows? But yeah, it's not. Again, I suppose asking that question tells us that there's it must be a bit of the Atreides special, if you see what I mean. Other people couldn't do this. She wants to know, how do they do it? How do they do it? How do they do it so quickly? I will give my life for you, person who I've met a couple of times. I am your servant for all. I will die for you. This kind of thing. It's all a bit disingenuous sometimes. So, sire, that's our Kynes manipulated. He's on board. He's on side. They've done it. They've done the Atreides charm. And yes, in this moment, he would give his life for Paul, just like everybody else. Well, I suppose we're about to see someone who has that relationship with the Atreides. Again, Kynes is interrupted. I know you mean this, yet hard and the interruption, bang, clunk, action, here it goes, kicks off. The door behind Paul slams open. Paul whirls to see reeling violence, shouting, clashes of steel, wax image faces grimacing in the passage. So his mother's beside him. Paul leaps for the door, and he can see Duncan Idaho there blocking the passage. His blood-pitted eyes visible through the shield blur, claw hands beyond him, arcs of steel chopping futilely at his shield. We're told the orange firemouth of a stunner repelled by the shield. Idaho's blades through it all, flicking on, nice onomatopoeia there, and the red dripping from them. And Kynes there moves up beside Paul, and they put their weight against the door. And from Paul's point of view here, he gets one last glance at Duncan Idaho, standing against a swarm of Harkonnen uniforms, his jerking, controlled staggers, black goat hair, red blossom of death in it. And the door closes, there's a snick, and Kynes throws the bolts. And that's poor old Duncan Idaho. I've put down my little, I'll do my little skulls when we lose a character here, but we have, I've gone with Duncan Idaho #1. And I thought that would be an interesting thing to keep track on. The deaths of the Duncans, if you like. But poor old Duncan, and a great last sort of stand. And I've made a wee note that it, I thought it was very reminiscent of the whole Hodor and the hold the door thing in what was it you call it? A Song of Ice and Fire. Just reminded me that the Hodor thing and that reminded me of this, I suppose. Yeah, but always got the sense of Duncan Idaho holding this door off on the other side, and really well accounting for himself. There's not too much to the description there, but it's pretty busy. And it really does give a good sense of the character, holding his own against. And of course, we hear Harkonnen uniforms, but we're going to be told in a second, of course, that these are Sardaukar in Harkonnen uniforms. So Duncan's, a good. What was it? The Fremen would call this a good exchange, I think. And of course, we know we learn a little bit more about what happens to Duncan here afterwards, actually, with his body. Let's see. I've got thought first that there's a stagnation of the empire here in this conversation. It had been in a tri-part Cold War for so long betwixt the Emperor, the Landsraad, and Chom that few can dream of it breaking. Yeah, and I think it's the nature of empires, thought first, that the way they stagnate. And this universe has this political situation, I suppose, within the Dune universe has been like this for an awful long time. We've got these generational families. And we've talked a wee bit about, I suppose, Castle Caladan at the very start kind of reminds me heavily, I suppose, some of the interactions of the castle at the start, Gormenghast, and this idea of ancient decay, this stagnation, and again, I suppose that it works on a number of different levels within Dune, but particularly in evolutionary stagnation. We're talking about the genes here, but the whole society here is quite stagnant. And the word that I keep using is it's retarded atavism. I think you get aspects of that within the Dune universe, but there's a stagnation of the empire here in this conversation. Yeah, and again, we'll go through this legal process, and it's really about just swapping one piece with another on a chessboard, in some sense, isn't it? And you even get the thought first that whenever Paul says, "Where are we?" It's when he's talking about his plan. Out of tools of statecraft, you said yourself. Jessica hears the bitterness in his voice. The Emperor has no sons, only daughters. But it's the bitterness in his voice. And if we backtrack to the Emperor, thinking about how he only has daughters, you could see possibly a similar future for Paul here that the Emperor is in. If you see what I mean, would Paul just be another Shaddam the Fourth? And of course, people getting bumped off and all of these kind of things, and the idea that this kind of feud as well within Canley. That was one thing I wanted to mention, by the way, folks, just before we go on. We're at the death of Duncan here, right? That's a good place to. Paul says that the Emperor won't risk total war. In fact, just quickly jump back about this. We have a couple of mentions of war here. If Kynes tells us that if the Landsraad High Council gets involved, here's all of your concerns, here's your case, there'll be one outcome, war. And what he calls it is general warfare between the Imperium and the Great Houses. Now, Paul says that then, Jessica says you aim for the throne, Paul says that the Emperor won't risk total war. Now, total war is not fought under any conventional sense. Total war means, arguably World War II was total war. You don't give a monkeys about civilians, anyone. Everything is a target, complete obliteration. There's no rules in warfare. Civilians are targets. Civilian populations are targets. This kind of thing. So what confuses me is that we're told that Canley exists. This which is and again we have this in the back of the book, and several things to do with the Landsraad and the Great Convention and so on. But Canley is a limited form of warfare that's designed to cut down on, I suppose, civilian casualties and what's the great military term? Collateral damage, isn't it? There's a euphemism if you've ever heard one. So the point I was just wondering was that the Canley that we've seen between House Atreides and House Harkonnen, if the Emperor won't risk total war, what's going on in Arrakis seems to be total war. They're killing everyone. It's not just we'll go in and kill the Atreides, and because it's a personal feud. The whole point about Canley, the forms are meant to be observed. Kynes is supposed to ignore anything like this, by the way, but the whole point is it's supposed to reduce civilian casualties, or not casualties of those not involved. And as we can see, the Harkonnen and the Sardaukar seem happy to kill everyone and anyone. So it reads like genocide on the page to me, and it reads like total war to me, but it's not. It doesn't read like Canley, I suppose. What's happened here, and so just that the Emperor won't risk total war. Even if Paul's talking about, I suppose, Canley with the Emperor. I got the sense that this is Canley and it became total war just with let's just do it, if you see what I mean. Yeah, so food for thought there, folks. And I suppose the idea that war renews is an interesting one, I suppose. We have a wee look at it in the PhD videos there, folks, if within the hero chapter, I suppose. But so, yeah, something we should have a wee look at in a wee bit more detail. But there we go. Duncan Idaho's deed. He's potato bread, as they would say in this country. He's dead. And we have Kynes has a little response, I suppose, in terms of his allegiances, because they're under attack here now. Where are we? Bear with me a wee second. He says, well, it looks like I've decided. Sorry, I appear to have decided, Kynes says. In other words, I guess I am supporting you guys now. And Paul lets us know, again, we had this little setup earlier. Someone's detected your machinery before it was shot down. Paul said he pulled his mother away from the door and met the despair in her eyes. And Kynes' response here we go. I should have suspected trouble when the coffee failed to arrive. Oh no. So the cup of Joe didn't turn up. I should have suspected something was badly wrong when I didn't get my coffee. There's a few things with coffee in this book, and we've had a wee sort of a chat about the improbable use of coffee in some science fiction books. And yeah, coffee's quite interesting. One of our drugs, of course, in Dune. And one that's, very, very important to the main characters, I think. But they've stopped amidst all of this chaos to get a cup of coffee. And it's not gone well for them, I think. So Paul points out, you've got a bolt hole here. Can we use it? Shall we? And Kynes sort of takes this deep breath and suppose acknowledging that, yep, we better. And he tells them that this door should hold for about 20 minutes against everything except a lasgun. And of course, what Paul said earlier and what Duncan said earlier, it's not a weapon, it's a defense. Whenever detonating the shield with this first lasgun prior, it's made everybody around them terrified of using another one. So Paul said they won't use lasguns. They have the fear that there might be shields on this side. And Jessica says, Sardaukar, those Sardaukar were it was Sardaukar in Harkonnen uniform. Of course, they're talking about getting evidence of these guys. So they can hear pounding at the door, rhythmic blows. And Kynes sort of points over to these cabinets this way. So this is our secret passage, Once again, a great sort of mainstay of mysteries and detective stories and adventure stories. Kynes indicates the cabinet this way. The first cabinet, there's a drawer, there's a handle inside, and the entire wall of cabinets swings open and reveals a black mouth of a tunnel. And we're told this door is also plastic. Jessica points out, you're well prepared, aren't you? And Kynes says, well, under the Harkonnens for 80 years. Yeah, basically, we should be. He herds them into the darkness and closes the door. So we get quite good. This in the sudden darkness, we get all these wee luminous arrows lighting up the place, if you look, which I think is quite good. So the luminous arrows on the floor, and they hear this voice behind them. It's Kynes. So he tells them, we're going to separate here. This wall is tougher, and it should stand for at least 1 hour in terms of the enemy trying to get through it. Follow these little luminous arrows. They're extinguished by your passage. So as you go over them, they go out. And they lead into a maze, which is handy. And at the exit, you'll find secreted a thopter. So on with a bit of this as well. More to come from Kynes. A storm is coming across the desert tonight. It's your only hope. We're told to have to dive into the top of it. Ride with it. My people do this. They stay high in the storm whenever they steal thopters, and you will survive. This is basically how they nick thopters. Because riders on the storm. Kynes says, try to escape, but he says he's going to try to escape another way. What have you, says Paul? If captured, he's going to run with, I'm the Imperial Ecologist, or Planetologist, and I was captured by these Atreides people. I've got away, this kind of thing. So Paul's thoughts go to running like cowards. But of course, how else can I live to avenge my father? So, this is flight is right here. Run away to fight another day, this kind of thing. And he turns to face the door, But Jessica, this is the door that Jessica says, Duncan is dead, Paul. You saw the wound. You can do nothing for him. Yes, this was Death Blossom, isn't it, or something? The red blossom of death. Yeah, anybody knows our science fiction? Death Blossom is the ultimate weapon, isn't it? On The Last Starfighter, I believe. It's a good film. I haven't seen that in years. So he's going to try to escape another way. The thought running like cards. How else can I live to avenge my father? And of course, let's hoping he lives to do something else, I suppose. But Duncan's dead. You saw the wound. Can't do anything for him. So there we go. Paul, again, I will take full payment for them all one day. And Kynes, again, back to the practicality. Not unless you must get out of here now. You've got to hurry now. Paul feels the man's hand on his shoulder. It's kind of, Kynes is almost treating him in a fatherly way here, I think. He's a bit of a surrogate father to Paul, only very briefly, I suppose. But just in terms of some interests and, I suppose, the sympathy for him here. Where will we meet, Kynes? I'll send the Fremen searching for you. The storm's path is known. And I've written, ? How? That's the hope. Satellites and weather controls, one of our questions and one of our mysteries in the Dune universe. So hurry now, he says, and Great Mother give you speed and luck. And at that point, Kynes leaves, and they hear him go in the darkness. So Jessica and Paul link hands. Jessica says they mustn't get separated, and Paul agrees, and off they go. So they follow the arrows back. They follow the arrows and they go black as they pass. And the arrows ahead allow them to sort of you can see enough arrows ahead that allows them to run. So it's clearly a I can nearly speak there, a pre-planned route. And just in terms of what Jessica says, you're well prepared, aren't you? Earlier, they are indeed. And this brings up a question with our motifs within Dune. This is a chapter that's about chaos in a way. Plans within plans within plans. There's our cyclical, repetitive, ever decreasing iterations, if you like. Have we become? This is really important. Plans within plans within plans. Have we become a part of someone else's plan now? And arguably, right from the beginning, they've been a part of somebody else's plan. And I think it's a really important question. We talk about, there's a little hint at the back of the book, by the way, about whose plan is this, what plan. So we're into a new plan. We've got Paul's plan. And up to this point, we've had the Bene Gesserit plan and the Emperor and the Barons plans, if you like. Two dominant plans sort of governing how everything's happening here. We're starting to see aspects of other plans. The Arrakis might have a plan. Liat and the Fremen have a plan, but Paul also has one here. So the arrows lead on through turnings and side openings, and that are only dimly sensed in the faint light. They go downward for a time, then up and ever upward. We're told there are steps that go rounded a corner, and they're brought up short at a glowing wall. There's a dark handle visible in the center. Paul presses the handle, and the walls swing away. So light flares up, and we're into another rough-hewn cavern. And inside this one is an ornithopter sitting right in the middle. We're told there's a flat grey wall, and there's a door sign on it, and it looms beyond the ornithopter. So this is a remote-controlled wall for launching. Well prepared. Jessica asks Paul, where did Kynes go? And Paul replies, well, he did what any good guerrilla leader would. He split us into two parties and made sure that he couldn't reveal our location if he was captured, because he doesn't know. So we got a sense that Leto was hoping for more emphasis on Paul's guerrilla education and guerrilla tactics, etc. A wee while back, and maybe this is a little bit of it appearing here. So Paul draws her into the room. Oh, hang on, where's my way back? I must have flipped back the wrong page there. Bear with me a wee second, folks. Paul draws her into the room, noting how their feet kicked up dust on the floor. No one's been here for a long time, he said. He seemed confident the Fremen could find us, she said. Paul adds, I share his confidence. I share that confidence. Sorry. So yeah, and he releases Jessica's hand. We go over to the ornithopter's left door, opens it, and secures his pack in the rear. We're told next, right? The ship's proximity's mast, he said. Instrument panel has remote door control, light control. 80 years under the Harkonnens taught them to be thorough. So Jessica leans, catching her breath. This bit's quite interesting. Let me just get our keynote here. Right. Jessica leaned against the craft's other side, catching her breath. The Harkonnens will have a covering force over this area, she said. They're not stupid. There's really important. She considered her direction sense, pointed right. The storm we saw is that way. So I've actually surrounded the phrase that the Harkonnens are not stupid. It's about time somebody said that, because they're not really, are they? They've been presented continually as a bit country yokel, this kind of thing. Just not, a bit subpar in terms of intelligence. And of course, it's the Harkonnens that have outclassed, outthought the Atreides, outpolitic them in every way, pretty much. The Baron's plan is a massive success. Excuse me a wee second. Okay, you all right, son? Thank you. Oh. Just checking on the sun there. Sorry. Right. So yeah, the area is just what I wanted to point out here. The Harkonnens will have a covering force over this area. They're not stupid. She figures out her direction. Since storm we saw was that way. Paul nods, and we get this part of his vision here. And it's quite interesting. He says, he fights the reluctance to move. So there's a sort of a fear in him. He knows its cause. He's aware of what's doing it, but finds no help in the knowledge. And we're told somewhere this night he has passed a decision nexus into the deep unknown. So as much as Jessica was talking about the area here a second ago, they have a covering force over the area. Paul talks about the time area. He knew the time area surrounding them, but the here and now existed as a place of mystery. Now, before I go any further, that's just to do. Remember, we backtrack to our epigraph at the start of the chapter. This is what Paul was talking in Irulan's Arrakis Awakening. This is kind of what the epigraph is about here. He tells us the vision can change the entire aspect. Sorry, he tells us the vision of time is broad, but when you pass through it, time becomes a narrow door. And always he fought the temptation to choose a clear, safe course, warning that path leads ever down into stagnation. So he's arrived at one of these kind of nexus points that you'll have a few of within the book. And it's simply that I suppose that the points of his vision within regard to this moment, he's in the here and now, if that makes sense. But the here and now is a place of mystery. He's not got this prescient sight that's fully working. He says it's though he sees himself from a distance go out of sight down into a valley, that there are countless paths up. Some carry Paul Atreides back to sight, but many did not. And again, that's this. We talked about the Alfred Korzybski, the general semantic sort of metaphor within the epigraph. Just so Muad'Dib. Oh, here we go. If you're on the floor of a valley, you cannot see beyond your valley. Just so Muad'Dib could not always choose to look across the mysterious terrain. That's that wee bit there. So that's just echoing what we have from the epigraph there. It's as though he could see himself from a distance go out of sight down into a valley, countless paths up. Some carry Paul Atreides back to sight, many do not. In other words, some of them bring him back alive and some don't. You can see many paths here where he dies. which must be a bit of a hard thing for a 15-year-old boy to deal with, all the multiple visions of his death. Time to start listening to that goth music, I suppose. So there is something that is making him there's many ways that he can go about this that will result in his death. It's causing him to pause a wee second. He knows why it's causing him, but Jessica interrupts. The longer we wait, the better prepared they'll be. And Paul says, get in and strap yourselves down. Right, strap yourself down. Okay. So here we go. Jessica joins her in the thopter, and the thought is blind ground unseen. His thoughts here is blind ground unseen in any prescient vision. Goodness, I'll take a wee break here a second, get some fluids, folks. I'll have a look at any wee comments there. Let's see. Oh, but I'm show them if you can do. Yeah, thought first is the cabinet. A short callback to the previous chapter of never having only one escape from a cave. Well, very good point. Yes, indeed. Fremen points out in the previous chapter, you'd be absolutely stupid to walk into a place with only one way in. Excellent. Yes, thank you, Thought First. Cynthia says, Thought First, agreed. I'm also reminded of the Baron's bolt hole adjacent to the room where he interrogated Leto and encountered the poison tooth. Yeah. And we had a wee chat about one of these underground sites found up in Larne from, I think, the Viking era, which was a hidey hole, I think I was telling you about, for locals, and has a wee short passage in and a wee short passage out. One way and one way out, I suppose. But the point was that was it the phrase, a granny with a broom could defend it. One enemy can only enter at the time. And if they want to keep at it, their bodies will just pile up and block this. Yeah, smart to have a way out, absolutely. And this is Fremen thinking here. And they've been caught on the hop a bit. I think not everything is going well to the Fremens. And I think it's kind of a bit sad, actually. It's some machinery that caused machinery that had broken down. That had caused I suppose, the Sardaukar and the Harkonnens to find them. So Paul realized with a more abrupt shock, let me see, that he's been giving more and more reliance to his prescient memory. And this has weakened him for this particular emergency. And he recalls a Bene Gesserit axiom. If you rely only on your eyes, your other senses weaken. Took it to himself again, now we're told, and promises never again to fall into that trap if he lives through this. So, of course, we know all about traps. The first step in avoiding them is being aware of their existence. So this is one that Paul's now aware of, I suppose, in terms of his new prescient abilities, that relying on them, dependency on it too much is not a good thing. It weakens him. And I suppose we'll see some of this develop throughout the Dune series. I think particularly later on with Paul and Alia, as we move on from Dune Messiah, particularly how Alia has to take more and more, I suppose, more melange to help with her limited prescient vision, I suppose. So we get into the ornithopter now. I think this is quite funny. Paul does a sort of wee checklist here, but it's like the way I looked at it was, let me just get to it there, but it's kind of safety harness check, mother's secure in the back, check. Off we go. That kind of thing. It was mother's secured. I thought it was kind of amusing. There we go. Fastened his safety harness, saw that his mother was secure, checked the aircraft. Wings at full spread rest, their delicate metal interleavings extended. He touched the retractor bar, watched the wings shorten for jet boost takeoff the way Gurney Halleck had taught him. The starter switch moved easily. Dials on the instrument panel came alive as the jet pods were armed. Turbines began their low hissing. You ready? He asked. Yep, says Jessica. Yes. So, again, lots of sort of clicky worry stuff, I suppose. Stuff for those of us who are technologically imaginative, I suppose. Lots of flickings of switches and jet boosts and wings retracting, and off they go. Excuse me. And again, his hand, we often talk about Paul's hand in terms of agency, etc., and power. His hand was a shadow on the dials. He trips the remote controlled door, There's a grating sound ahead, and a cascade of sand swishes away. There's a dusty breeze. I think you can feel it on his cheek, and he closes his door and feels the sudden pressure. So the wide patch of dust blurred stars, the shelf beyond, there's a suggestion of sand ripples. And they take off, and it's like a bird out of its nest. So just an awful lot of, I suppose, taking off stuff here. And the vehicle has dual controls. So through interaction with the dual controls, Jessica is able to sort of touch them lightly and get a sense of Paul's movements, feels the sureness of his movements with the controls. We're told she's both frightened and exhilarated, which is interesting. Yeah, it's all, as much as it's all fearful, it's a bit of fun. And well, it's not fun, it's adventure and excitement, isn't it? Exhilarated. Paul's training is our only hope, his youth and his swiftness. So let's have a wee look. The Thopter leaped like a frightened animal, surged southwest towards the storm and the great curve of the desert. Let's see. Oh, sorry, I missed a wee bit there. Yeah, I suppose it's not really that important, is it? Just flying, there's the dust-reddened second moon of Arrakis is coming up above the horizon to the right. Dark stars are out, and it defines the ribbon trail of this storm. So they're going storm chasing, basically. We're told that the wings are like beetle stubs, the G-force pulled at their flesh as the craft comes around in a tight bank. Sorry. And at this point, they've got company. So this is where Jessica goes, there's jet flares behind us. Paul says he sees them and applies more power. So this is a bit of a chase. Excuse me. That's the point where the Thopter leaped like a frightened animal. They head southwest towards the storm and the great curve of the desert. In the distance, you can see shadows where the rocks ended and the basement complex sinking beneath the dunes. Beyond this is the moonlight fingernail shadows, we're told. Dunes diminishing into one into another. And above the horizon, the flat immensity of the storm like a wall against the stars. This big storm coming at them. So at this point, the Thopters are fired upon. Something jarred the Thopter, shell burst. Jessica gasped. They're using some kind of projectile weapon. And there's an animal grin on Paul's face. Again, going with this, that the Thopter leaped out like a frightened animal. There's an animal grin on his face. They're avoiding the lasguns. Again, the defensive nature of, I suppose, Duncan Idaho's attack is making them safe. Actually, nobody wants to fire a lasgun around here. Not after that big nuclear explosion. Jessica says, we've got no shield. But they don't know that, says Paul. So again, another shudder as they're attacked, and Paul looks back. One of them he's able to determine is fast enough in order to keep up with him. So he returns his attention to the course, watching the storm wall grow high in front of them, and it looks like we're told it looks like a tangible solid. And we get a little bit of mental drift here, I think. Either that, or it's not maybe. I suppose with Paul, we have to consider: is this just him multitasking? But it's just food for thought, I suppose. Projectile launchers, rockets, all the ancient weaponry. That's one thing we'll give the Fremen, Paul whispered. And you kind of almost wish Kynes was here to go, not now, get. But yeah, he's thinking on arming the Fremen with ancient weapons. And of course, the anachronistic kind of thing, and the weird thing to us is that we're told that they're, projectile rockets, missiles, this kind of thing, aren't we? Projectile launchers, rockets, ancient weaponry. And of course, this isn't ancient weaponry, it's modern weaponry in the time of Frank's writing, I suppose. So, Jessica, right, so here comes the storm. The storm, Jessica said, hadn't you better turn? What about the ship behind us? He's pulling up now. Again, a little bit of action, a bit of dialogue. Paul stubbed the wings, banked hard left into the deceptively slow boiling of the storm wall, felt his cheeks pull in the G-force. So he appeared to glide into a slow clouding of dust that got heavier and heavier. It blots out the desert and the moon. And the aircraft, we're told, becomes like a long horizontal whisper of darkness. And the only light comes once again, this green luminosity of the instrument panel. It's pretty common. So again, this is about really heading at the end of this chapter. It's a little lesson on Arrakis, isn't it? And storms. We've been told about storms before, but here we have two of our characters flying into one. And this kicks in Jessica's mind here. Here, let's just read it. Through Jessica's mind flashed all the warnings about such storms. They had cut metal like butter, etched flesh to bone, and ate away the bones. She felt the buffeting of dust-blanketed wind. It twisted them as Paul fought the controls. She saw him chop the power, felt the ship buck. The metal around them hissed and trembled. "Sand!" Jessica shouted. Now, she saw the negative shake of his head in the light from the panel. Not much sand this high. So again, if sand at this speed, I suppose with winds of this speed, would be making a bit of a mess of this thopter. And like with Paul, either through his own prescience or else his own knowledge, there wouldn't be much sand this high. And she can feel them sinking deeper into the maelstrom. I was in I used to work a long time ago. I worked security at Heathrow Airport once upon a time, and we're talking about the mid 1990s, I think. And a couple of things happened there, but I was sitting in a little box, basically a little hut, and saw this cloud coming at our hut. Myself and my partner at the time went, "What is that on the horizon? Can you see that?" There's just like this, just what's coming towards us. And we just kind of went, close the windows now. And we did. And within about a few seconds, the whole thing just went, all our little glass cabin just went black. We were completely surrounded and swarmed by locusts. And I'd never seen a locust in real life in my life. I'm from Northern Ireland, but we're in Heathrow Airport, and we've got something to do with some wind. Something picked them up. It was a thing. There was a note on the weather, and it was really weird. And it kind of reminded me of that. I'd seen pink snow in Heathrow as well, but yeah, very strange thing to be. And our cabin was surrounded for about a minute, I think, and then they cleared off wherever they were going. One of those odd environmental things, I suppose. So, sinking deeper and deeper into the maelstrom, and this is from Jessica, but we switch over to Paul's point of view. Paul sets the wings to full soaring length, heard them creak with the strain, eyes on his instruments, gliding by instincts, fighting for altitude. The sound of the passage diminishes, and the thopter rolls to the left. Paul focuses on the glowing globe altitude curve, his altimeter, I suppose, and fought his craft back to level flight. So Jessica here, we're told she has an eerie feeling of standing still, that the motion is external to them. Then this vague tan, if you like the color, flowing against the window reminded her of the powers around them. So yeah, this is one of the ones where the verisimilitude of Arrakis kind of falls down a wee bit. But it's just part of the planet, so we'll not worry about it too much. But we're basically told winds to 700 or 800 kilometers an hour. She thought, adrenaline edginess gnawed at her. That's a pretty powerful storm, to be honest with you, about 70, 800 kilometers an hour. Don't think there would be much left of their little thopter, to be honest. She thought adrenaline edginess gnawed at her. I must not fear, she told herself, mouthing the words of the Bene Gesserit litany. Fear is the mind killer. And we're told slowly, I like this bit in the book, by the way, slowly, Her long years of training prevailed. Calmness returned. And this is the bit I like. It's between the calmness, I suppose. Paul says, we have the tiger by the tail. Paul whispered, we can't go down. We can't land. I don't think I can lift us out of this. We have to ride it out. So we talk about how, I suppose, Jessica knows exactly the right things to say to Paul in the previous chapter. We kind of almost had to... has Paul figured out exactly the right thing to say to Kynes here in this chapter? But at this point, I've just put what he says here is possibly the worst thing to say to her. She goes, must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. The training kicks in. Calmness returns. Paul opens his mouth. We have the tiger by the tail. Can't go down. Can't land. Don't think I can lift us out of this. We'll just have to ride it out. And the result of that is the calmness drained out of her. And I've just put lol, laughing out loud. Between the calmness returns, he opens his mouth, calmness drained out of her. I just thought it was kind of funny. And he could have maybe said something. If we have that level of awareness with these characters, I think perhaps he could have said something that would have put her mind a bit more at ease, I think, But there we go. So Jessica felt her teeth chattering, clamped them together. I suppose that the calmness gone, the shakes, the nerves, etc., shock of it all, perhaps, and she hears Paul's voice, low and controlled. And here we go. This is what he says. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past me, I will turn to see fear's path. When the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. Another cliffhanger. And there we go. and I do like the cliffhangers. And they're good in this part of the book. I think they really do drive the action. But yeah, what a great chapter. And I suppose a meeting of minds with Paul and Leet. We get a fabulous death for Duncan Idaho, a particularly, awesome, kick-ass sort of death. This is the death of Duncan Idaho. I suppose that Herbert got a lot of reaction from fans and didn't like it that this character was killed at all. It turned out to be a very popular character and is, I think, a very popular character within the Dune series. And turns out to be, I suppose, what this major character that goes at this point is actually incredibly important to the entire story. And I suppose that's one of those things sometimes that people are a wee bit, they can have a bit of a bother with Dune in some ways, that like our major set of villains aren't really in the book until book 2. And, I don't know, there's things sometimes we get a hero, some of our heroes bumped off pretty fast here. But of course, Duncan will return. Oddly enough, and it's not that we would ever get any sense of that if we've only read Dune. By the way, no, he's dead as a doornail, if you see what I mean. Dead as a dodo. Sorry. But it is a good wee chapter, I think, and there's a lot of interesting. There's a lot of action in it, and again, it's driving the action forward and taking us. I suppose we've gone into the. I suppose that through the rebirth of the still tent, they've done a bit of fleeing. We've gone into this Imperial Ecological Testing Station, which is going to, again, opening up some of our knowledge about Arrakis, the places that are in it, some of the mysteries. And we're pushing south ever further towards, and hopefully here at this point, they've got this thought they're off towards the deep desert where they can hide in safety from the Harkonnen, and we can start to get to know the Fremen. And we've seen Leet Kynes here take a side. We also know that Gurney Halleck had survived and was with the smugglers. We've seen Thufir Hawat either dead or captured. Well, he's been captured in the previous chapter. And here we get an end for Duncan, who, Duncan has a bit of a time in this chapter, and I suppose in terms of excuse me, was it a fair exchange? Isn't that how the Fremen talk about it? Duncan not only manages to set off a nuke here, and goodness knows how much damage he does with that. But he really does, and it's all in the moment, isn't it? It's his choice to be a guard here. He could have run in on the other side of the door and sealed it if it was plasteel and given them. He could be with them, but it's a sort of it's very heroic in that sense. And if we particularly look at all this talk about "I would die for you," this kind of thing we talked about, "Dulce decorum est pro patria mora." It's a good and noble thing to die for one's fatherland. It's not. Or motherland, it's fatherland in that case. So yeah, we actually get this kind of where we get to see the Atreides charm at work. "I would die for you, Kynes." We end up with pretty much where Kynes is going to probably do the same for Paul, but we actually get just after that an example of an Atreides man dying for Paul and Jessica, and yeah, Sword Master of Ginaz, Duncan Idaho. We hear so much he's been a bit of a drunken geezer and so on. We've probably been a bit let down by the reality of him, but actually here is the reality of Duncan. He's pretty admirable, and he's a pretty good fighter, isn't he? And he really seems to help bring the Atreides together, if you know what I mean. He just helps to sort their heads out somehow here, I think. It's just by his presence, I think. Let's have a wee look at your comments, folks. And if you've got any questions, fire away. Not first agreed. I'm also reminded of the Baron. Baron's bolt hole adjacent to him where he interrogated Leto and encountered the poison tooth. You also get a sense that isn't that in his lighter, isn't it? I think that there's hidden rooms and hidden passages, and even spying on people and that kind of thing is quite popular. Jessica relies on let's see, Cynthia says Jessica relies on Paul's youth and swiftness. Could be argued that those are animal qualities. Another frightened animal. Very good, Cynthia. Yes, indeed. Thought first. Yes, the recurring fight of the Gom Jabbar test, with reminded that fear is the mind killer as the solution to the test. And yeah, I suppose interesting one that we pointed out, wasn't it? The litany against fear, as we're told, isn't the litany against fear. We're told it's the response to the litany against fear, but so we often wonder what the litany is. Fear was one of those things that. Thought first, you just joined us tonight. We were having a wee chat that just as we ended book 1 of Dune and started book 2, Muad'Dib. We were talking about a few things that had been kind of running throughout the story. Really, if you wanted to pick 2 key words out of book 1 of Dune, and we're seeing them again here, fear and terror, or words related to terror, terrible purpose, terrifying, this kind of thing. We were pointing out that these are the children, fear and terror, Phobos and Deimos, if you like, are the children of Ares, war, the Greek god of war. And we do have a lot of associations with the Trojan War here within this story. So yeah, and we've got quite a few new things to deal with here as well, guys, because we've got one of, I suppose, we're getting into a sense of Paul's visions and a little bit about how it works, I suppose, and that it's limited. And this is the first time that we encounter one of these, what we'll call, I suppose, a decision nexus. So it's a point where pretty much the present, Paul's caught up to the present in terms of visions that he's seen. And if we remember going all the way back to the start of the book, which I'd have to dig out my other notebook for, but remember the whole conversation with Gaius Helm Boheme about remembering being asked about this conversation and the way the conversation works, and ultimately we're going to catch up with that conversation one day, where it's Paul telling Chani about if I recall. It'll be interesting when we get to that point. So we have a death of a major character here. We have Paul seeing multiple deaths. One of the key things really that's brought in here is chaos. It's a big part of this book. And there's a few commentators. I'm trying to remember. There's one commentator in particular thinks that Frank Herbert preempts chaos theory in this book, which is not the case at all. I suppose in chaos is an interesting thing and has been around for a long, long time in one shape or form. So yeah, it's chaos, and we get to see Paul really coming into his own here, not just with Sire, this being a duke, but really how he works and influences Kynes, and again leaves this situation with allies. They'll be Fremen on the lookout for them. Kynes is on their side at this point. If he had any doubts, I suppose the Sardaukar have kind of forced the issue for him, haven't they, by turning up? We also get this setup now. Paul's plan is a go that ultimately there's going to be a legal aspect to it. If they can get that far, there's going to be a political solution to it if they can get that far. But ultimately, in between, it's going to require military use, military action, I think, and chaos. Which, in that sense, by the way, whenever Kynes points out that the result, if you do get to the Landsraad, if they hear your case, the only outcome is war, general warfare between the Imperium and the Great Houses. That's what Jessica calls chaos. So there we go. So yeah, it's the other thing, I suppose, in terms of purchasing what the Atreides purchase here, for your loyalty, for Kynes' loyalty, I offer my loyalty. And we have that kind of, I suppose, the perversion of loyalty, loyalism that we get here with the whole Orange Order stuff, this kind of thing. We talk about the various the Orange Catholic Bible, the various influences within that. It's a trait that's here, I suppose, this loyalty. I'm prepared to die for my country, and I'm prepared to take you all with me at the same time. This kind of thinking, which I suppose if you want to think about it in terms of he who can destroy a thing controls a thing. If you applied that to people, again, another mindless philosophy, isn't it? Really. So the only other thing I think that's really interesting, we're moving into some legal aspects of the Dune universe here. I thought the one that was very important there is the phrase that's written above the Emperor's door, and what a kind of quite a stupid and obnoxious thing, but again, it's the fact that an emperor writes it that makes it have, I suppose, real meaning. But I just thought it's a very stupid statement. What is it? Law is, if I'm just looking for it here, law is the ultimate science. Is that it? Law is the ultimate science, written above the Emperor's door. I just read utter nonsense. I propose to show him the law. But yeah, it is one of those things where if we think about the words authority, author, being a dictatorship, dictate, all of these words are to do with words in a funny way, So there we go. And I also think one other wee thing is that we get a little bit of sense of the Atreides bravura, if you like, with Paul here. A little bit of the Atreides coming out in him with Kynes, I think. That showmanship, that the sense of the sardonyx there, I think, a little bit too. So we're really starting to see Paul change. There's changes going on within him here. And particularly, how this this racial consciousness that's beginning to emerge in his mind, the prescient ability, all of this, it must be an awful lot. And not only that, with all of these people trying to kill you at the same time, it must be a fair bit to handle, And Jessica kind of just is kind of observing, commenting, oh no, you mustn't. It's almost that. Jessica's kind of, I don't know, Jessica's almost a commentator just really in this. We get some of her thoughts. She educates us a little bit, reminds us a little bit about storms. But I don't know. There's a sense of Paul stepping away from his mother here, even though they're moving together. And just kind of some of her responses, I think, were quite funny. Oh, Paul, what? Blackmail? All of this stuff, And again, by the way, Paul's blackmailing the Emperor. Yeah. Blackmail is a crime, isn't it? The Atreides are well up on this kind of stuff. Manipulation of the law by the Atreides is one thing. Blackmail, etc. All of these kind of things, I think, no bother. you know. But there we go. We have another cliffhanger. I'm ready to start off. I think the next chapter is another good one as well, because particularly the epigraph for the next chapter. What do you despise? By this you are truly known. Hmm. That's a good one. One of those ones that we can all answer ourselves, if you like. Hmm. Cynthia says, still mulling over the problems at the testing station. Maybe the nuclear explosion that Idaho set up with the shield is what caused the machinery at the station to break down, thus his death. It could be one of those things where, yeah, just a series of little iterations of things happens to. Yeah, it's. I don't know. It seems like a well set up place. They know where it is. They have all of these stations. They're maybe not in them obviously all the time. Um, Yeah, it's quite possible. Yeah, I mean, a nuclear bomb going off in the vicinity. I suppose I thought it was one of the lame things about Idaho, really. Um, where is it? My lord, my lady, the Fremen have a temporary hiding place nearby. But what about back there, etc., etc.? Oh, I've left them a little, sir. Really, no. I've planted. There's a nuclear explosion is imminent. Run is what is what he should have said there. And again, maybe a sense of drama, because it is a story. We need a bit of that, I suppose. But yeah. So we've got nuclear explosions. We've got chaos. We've got action. And of course this takes it into the ornithopter and the flying into the storm. Literally flying into the storm, into the heart of it, and riding it out. It's very, I made a wee note there, riders on the storm, not in that sense of it. It's just yeah. And it's all very dangerous and mysterious. And we've had our underground testing stations, secret passages, secret doorways, all of this stuff. I think it's great fun. If you're a 15-year-old reading this book, I think you'd love it. It reminds me on a lot of stuff, as I said, particularly once we get into the desert. Things like from the Arabian Nights, some of those stories. And yeah, the cliffhangers are working well. Kind of at the point I'm reading one chapter to go really at the minute. I'm trying not to, just with the level of notes I'm taking for it, try not to rush on too much. But yeah, so I'm not reading ahead, and I don't. And my memory is just. I'm trying not to spoil it for myself. If you see what I mean, I'm trying to take each chapter as it comes. Granted, we all know a fair bit about what goes on, but it's trying to get a wee bit of fresh sense of each chapter. So I'm enjoying the cliffhangers, and literally, that's it. I'm not going to look at this till tomorrow, and I wonder what happens. And I always check each epigraph to see what comes next. So we're up to chapter 26 for next time on Sunday, and we are approaching halfway point of the book. So we're getting there, folks. Find my throat holds out. So yeah, it could well be that the nuke. Of course, well, the point that I wrote next to it, Cynthia, simply put, was all machines fail. Which is one of those kind of indicators within Dune itself, I suppose, that all machines fail sooner or later. But there we go. Yeah, I thought the stuff about Shamir, by the way, the name Shamir, I thought that was fascinating. There's some really interesting stuff. I just had a wee nosy about it on Wikipedia, but the idea that this worm Shamir and all with involved with the death of Solomon, that kind of thing, I thought that was really interesting, and just from a person who enjoys stories, myths, that kind of thing from the ancient world, but also in the sense that let me just find it again, Shamir, that like a stone, like a flint, I think is what the name means in Hebrew, but the stone is like a substance of power from the point of creation, something like that. So it reminded me on lots of things, particularly with the worm and Solomon. That reminded me on the Morrigan and Cucullin. Yeah, but the actual stone itself, in terms of that, why is this guy with coffee culture? It's just a coincidence, maybe, but we've always talked about names do have meaning within this book. So we always kind of check out the etymology of any name that we find, and that's a fascinating one. And a worm or a substance, it's like a stone, like a flint stone, described as a green stone of power, and it reminded me of Vril as well. And so it's just I would have to be curious about that. I wouldn't mind looking up some of that stuff if I had the time. First says off point, but I really need to get another copy. I've had a habit of passing on my personal copies to those interested over the years. We've been having a bit of a natter about that. Thought first, no matter what you do, if you're joining us tonight, don't buy that one. Okay, this is the 50th anniversary edition that's had a it's in the bookshops at the moment. They put a wee kind of it's not a sticker, but a moon thing there, now image and motion picture. And what they've done is they've put in the film thing there. But we've been using this version. Thought first, it's riddled with mistakes, misprints left, right, and center. And Peter de Vries is consistently called Peter de Vriend. Yeah, we've been. I think that's probably the last couple of chapters. Will be the first ones where we haven't found any mistakes or misprints. Except the old thought or lol. Oh, the thought there's a contrast about. Yeah, that's it. When all others are broken down, exactly. And I suppose it's your random. I suppose Keynes' response to it is I think that it happens quite a lot. And we got that sense from the spice mining with the Atreides. Arrakis is hard on equipment. Sand gets into everything, this kind of thing. Proximity sensors is the main thing that they're getting caught by here. And we're told they've got proximity sensors in the tent as well. By the way, we've also got Paul here starting to deliberately manipulate the legend. You have a legend, the Lisan al-Gaib, the voice from the outer world. Of course, Leto told him that you could capitalize on that. The field generator equipment's not working, unable to mask from proximity direct detectors. So it's field generator equipment. This is something to do with the Holtzman field, isn't it? Can you repair it? No. The parts, they don't spare parts is the problem there, isn't it? So we'll do without machinery. So I think it's a thing that's just happened too late. And probably the nuclear explosion. Well, I don't know. I would imagine that you wouldn't want to approach a nuclear explosion too quickly, would you? It might be still a little bit hot, if you see what I mean. But yes, indeed. And the old thought, there's that. The old thought was a con as to how well it does perform when all others are broken down. There's the other thing, Cynthia, as well. Do you remember about the old spice harvester? Isn't it? It has a name, isn't it? Is it something like Old Bertha or something? Was it they're told whenever they're doing a bit of an inventory on equipment? They're told that the Harkonnens used to put these. Anybody who'd been misbehaving into this old spice harvester as a punishment. But I suppose the point was that this old harvester just keeps going. And I think it had a name. Maria's. I'm trying to find the chapter here just to have a wee spice mining. It's possibly before that. Let me see. But I don't think it's actually in the bit where they're harvesting the spice. If you see what I mean, I think it's prior to that. I think whenever they're doing a sort of an inventory. Trying to think answers. Let me see. Just have a wee quick look here. It's not Bertha. Hang on a second. I wonder is it Bertha or something like that. Usually that's the sort of, could be Maria. The sort of names that they give machines like that, isn't it? Let's see. Well, there we go. Let's see. Find. It is. It's old Maria. There you go. Well done. I was thinking Big Bertha or something like that. Well done indeed. It's the one they call Old Maria. This is a Harvest Factory how it said, we chose one in good repair for this projection. There's one dragline outfit that came in with the first team of Imperial ecologists, though, and it's still running, although I don't know how or why. It's the one they call Old Maria. It belongs in a museum. And he had said, I think the Harkonnens kept it as a punishment job, a threat hanging over the workers' heads. Be good or you'll be assigned to Old Maria. Yeah. I actually kind of got the sense that if I had to be assigned to any of those kind of harvested, Old Maria would be the one I'd want. It seems to be the one that's working, isn't it? It's that kind of thing, yeah. Maria, Cynthia, that's what it is. That's the one we're talking about. Are we talking about the first Dune here? Sorry, yes, we are indeed. It says Rainbow Pen. We're on Dune book. We're on to book 2 of Dune, which Dune is divided into 3 parts. So we're on to part 2, which is Muad'Dib. This is chapter 25 we were looking at today, and we're just sort of wrapping up. So we were just having a chat about old equipment on. I think everybody, pretty much the bad things happen in this chapter because of the failure of equipment, and we're having a wee bit of a natter about some old pieces of equipment just seem to go on, don't they? So in particular, there's a reference to a spice harvester that the Harkonnens use to punish people, I suppose, but it's a very good working order, and it's called Old Maria. That's what we were just trying to figure out there. But there we go. I'm in it, laughing out loud, says Rainbow Pen. Can relate. Excellent. Thank you for joining us, Rainbow Pen. We're just about to wrap up for the night, but if you've got any questions or anything, fire away. And we're here every Thursday and Sunday at 9 p.m. GMT +1 with our book club, providing all goes well and I don't lose my voice or anything like that. Yes, the thought of contract. Yeah, I can relate to that as well. Our cars are just consistently being repaired and breaking down and repairing and breaking down. It's one of those things. But machines do fail, I suppose. And that's part of the lesson here. Within Dune, I suppose, the idea is that also running with what Samuel Butler said, man is a machinate animal. And I think Arrakis can have as much wear and tear on a person, on machinery as it can on people. But especially when we've got 700 to 800 kilometer, winds with these storms. Which, yeah, I'd say it wouldn't be too pleasant to be caught out in the open on Arrakis at all. Excuse me. I love how humans ascend in Dune. That's a good question. Well, I suppose it's an interesting point. Is it do they really ascend? The idea that they're above us, I suppose, is interesting. This is one of the wee points that we made today. It's the point that Jessica makes with I suppose we didn't linger on it at the time. How Jessica talks to sorry, let me see. What Jessica thinks of how here we go. Kynes has gone, sire. The word is torn from him. Jessica saw it, not talking. He's not talking to a 15-year-old boy, but to a man, and it's the next bit, to a superior. Super. Above is what that means. To be a superior is to be above someone. So it's, I suppose, we've got the thing that Dune really does look at, as I suppose, is fundamentally how different groups of human beings evolve, as you say, and we get even forms of maybe ascension. It would be rubbish if we just relied on machines. I want the genetic engineering technology. I suppose that's the whole, even of that sort of thing. We need, our bodies degrade, don't we? Man is a machinate animal. I'm old enough now to feel that things aren't actually starting to keep, things aren't working properly anymore. Getting old, need parts replaced, such as my throat, for example. But yeah, it's a very busy chapter, and I think there's a lot of action, a lot of mystery, and we're just starting to see Paul become, what's going on with this guy? And he can see the future, and we're told, yeah, he can. Okay, shit, right, okay. So how does that work? Well, what we're starting to see is it's not perfect. It doesn't work. It's not full prescience, is it? And I actually thought genuinely there's some quite funny wee bits in this chapter as well. By the way, just some of the just the odd little side comment I thought was quite witty. There we go. Well, yeah, that's a big part of Dune, isn't it? Technology being a crutch, and this is what Herbert calls I suppose also the Presbyterian fixation is a big part of it as well, isn't it? Man's determination to, that we can solve all of our problems with more technology rather than less of it. It's it's an interesting one. It's funny enough, even when we look at the world today in terms of the environment and all that's happening to it, the biggest problem, I suppose, is economics and money. That everything that's done to the planet is done for money, and money's a system and nothing else. Yeah, very, very interesting. I said, and it ends with a cliffhanger, folks. And once again, there we go. I'm enjoying the cliffhangers. I really like them. And I'll tell you what, folks, I will start wrapping up now and say goodnight as well, because I do want to pop onto our Science Fiction Friday tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Plenty to chat about, to be honest with you. And we've missed a Friday and a Saturday because of my sore throat. And we have another lengthy chapter on Sunday. So I'll call it a night for there tonight. Thank you very much, folks, for joining me. And so I hope you can, if you want to pop on, ask any questions. We've got our Science Fiction Friday tomorrow night at 9 o'clock, GMT +1, where we would have a bit of an adder about all things science fiction. And we had some Dune stuff in the news as well, so we can have a wee look at that. And then we'll be back again for chapter 26 on this Sunday at 9 p.m. GMT +1 here on Doc Sloan's Science Fiction Station on YouTube. So I hope you can join me then. In the meantime, I'll say thank you very much for joining me, and I hope you all look after yourselves no matter where you are, and take care of yourselves and be safe. Thought First, great night, Doc. Thank you for all you do, good sir. Thank you very much, Thought First, and thanks for joining us. All of you folks, take care of yourselves now, and I'll chat to you real soon. All the very best, and thank you. Good night. Do 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 ba 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 ba.